Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me again on my live stream here on Twitch. Couple of housekeeping things just before we get into anything tonight. The first thing I wanted to mention is that as of next week, there will be no live stream happening next week. The reason for that is I'm out to do a series of user group sessions in England, so I won't be here next Monday, which is the 28th of January, so there'll be no stream next week. The following week, I'm planning on, hopefully, this topic, which is the export command in Chocolatey. Hopefully we'll be finished that part, and what we will be working on instead is an open source tool known as Git Release Manager. So that is a tool that I've been the maintainer of for a while now, and it's kind of pivotal to the workflow that I use for almost all of my open source projects. It allows me to control a GitHub release. So whether it's finalizing a release, adding assets to a release, creating release notes, all of those sorts of things. So this tool has been kind of in maintenance mode for a while now, and there's a couple of things I want to add to it, and one of that is to improve the command line parsing that's done within Git Release Manager. So what I'm hoping to be able to do is to invite a colleague of mine, an online colleague of mine called Patrick Svensson, who is the creator of a library called Spectre CLI, which is a .NET Core first command line parsing utility that he's been working on and he's now using in a few of his projects. So what I'm hoping to be able to do is bring Patrick onto the stream to show how I can use Spectre CLI within Git Release Manager. Now, all of that is subject to me figuring out how to get Patrick onto the stream. What I'm hoping to be able to do is somewhere up here in the top right hand corner, I will have Patrick's face in the same way that you can see my one here. The technicalities of that I haven't quite figured out yet, but I have got 2 weeks to figure it out. So I'm hoping to be able to do that. If anyone knows how to do that, I'd welcome any contributions to that. What I'm going to try to do, and what I've been told I've been able to do, is to use an NDI output from Skype, which will allow me to have a video source in OBS, which is the video of essentially Patrick from that Skype conversation. So that's the general idea. How that all comes together, let's wait and see. But that's where we're going to go to. Okay? So what we're here tonight to talk about is the follow-up from the stream that we did last week. So last week we stubbed out the basics for a new export command that we will make use of within the Chocolatey CLI. So what we were able to do was when we actually ran Chocolatey, which we did by going into here and going to the properties window, we can see that we can run this export command now. So that when that command is parsed by the choco.exe, it then filtered through into this new class that we created, which was the Chocolatey export command. So in there, we kind of spoke through how we needed to override some of the methods, or rather to implement some of the methods that come along as part of this iCommand interface. With that done, we were then able to think about the additional command line arguments that we would need to pass in. Now also, at the end of all of that, we then took the results that we get back. So the idea behind this Choco export command is that we'll list out all of the packages that are currently installed on in my local machine, and then it'll take that and then we will generate a config file, a packages.config file, that's then saved to the file system with We spoke about adding the ID of the package and also the version if we pass in a command line argument to say include the package version or not. So that was that, and it was functional. We got to a point where we were able to create this ctemp packages.config file, but what we left in the notes that we left in the do comments was a number of things that we wanted to attack in the second pass, if you like, of doing the export command. Now, one thing I want to bring up, and one thing I'm hoping to get to this evening, but we might not depending on how things go, is I want to start looking at also adding some tests to the code that we're creating so that we know that we are doing the right thing. We know that the code that we're adding, one, hasn't broken anything, and two, that the code that we're executing is actually doing what we want it to do. Now, we've kind of tested that already because we are generating a file, and that file has the information in it that we want. But we also want to make sure that the code paths that we're writing are actually being executed correctly and in the way that we want it to. So the first thing I want to bring up is that within Visual Studio 2017, there is a test explorer. So over here, if you haven't got this open, then it's just literally within test and then Windows, and then there's a test explorer in here. What you'll find is that out of the box, the test runner explorer will find the tests that are available within the solution. So we found in here that there are 577 Chocolatey tests, and then there are 772 integration tests for Chocolatey. Now, those were picked up automatically by Visual Studio Community Edition, but what you'll find is if we go ahead and try and run one of these tests, so let's just drill down to this one, and let's say run selected tests, what you'll find is that Visual Studio seems to try to run the tests. You'll have noticed that there was a little clock icon appeared to indicate that it was kind of doing something, but then we didn't get any results returned. So we weren't able to actually find out if that unit test passed correctly or not. Now, in order to get that to work, we need to add an additional extension into Visual Studio so that Visual Studio can interpret and then execute those unit tests correctly for us. So what that looks like is if we go up to the extension and updates, then onto the online section, and we do a search here for NUnit, then what you'll find is that there are a number of NUnit extensions available for Visual Studio. Now, the one that we are interested in is the NUnit 2 adapter. Now, the reason that I know that is that if we go back to the Solution Explorer and look within the tests project, and then look at the packages.config file, then what we'll find here is that the package that we're using is NUnit 2, or specifically 2.6.4. Now, if we were on a higher version of NUnit, so there is an NUnit 3, so we would obviously need the NUnit 3 test adapter rather than the NUnit 2. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get that NUnit 2 package installed. So just go back to online here, and then search again for NUnit. Then we'll click on download here. And then what Visual Studio is going to ask you to do, and that yellow bar at the bottom there, was it's not actually going to install anything until you close and then reopen Visual Studio. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's close Visual Studio. And then we'll see the V6 installer spinning up, which is then going to install that extension into our Visual Studio instance that we have here. So let's just let that finish. And then click close, and then let's reopen Visual Studio again. And once Visual Studio is open, we'll go ahead and open the Chocolatey solution one more time. So that's a good question by Manfred in the chat room. So what Manfred's asking is, couldn't you install the required VS extension via Chocolatey in the build.ps1 bootstrapper you've got to run anyway? Short answer is absolutely you could do that. The one slight caveat to that, that's a bit of a sideline. Let's go off on that little sideline, man. I think that's valid. So if we go here to chocolatey.org and we look at docs and we look for helper methods, couldn't install, yep, and then, well, let's just check before we go into that. I will mention what I was going to go up and mention there, but let's just check to see if there is an NUnit test adaptive package for. There's a console runner, that's not what we want. Project loader, GUI runner, Visual Studio project loader extension. No, I don't think that's it either. So there is, from what I can see at a quick glance, there is no existing Chocolatey package for that extension. So we could certainly make one that would do that work for us. What I was going to bring up was if we go to the function reference here, then you'll notice that there is a v6. There is a v6 helper method for Chocolatey. So Chocolatey is aware of what a v6 is, and it will attempt via this install Chocolatey v6 package to install that extension into Visual Studio. Now this extension, this helper method worked perfectly up to and including Visual Studio 2017. Now the reason that it kind of broke is because in Visual Studio 2017 they changed they changed the folder structure of where you would expect Visual Studio to be installed to, and as a result of that, the actual v6 installer that we use in this commandlet doesn't actually work properly anymore. However, if I go over to here and look at GitHub and look at my pull requests here, I actually looked into this recently, and over here on Mads Christensen's website. So Mads Christensen, for those of you who don't know, is I don't know his official title. Let's see if it comes up here. He is the web developer and Visual Studio extension author for Microsoft. So he does a lot of extensions. If you've not come across one of Mads' extensions, you're probably doing something wrong. He's got a lot of them, right? Now, what I found was I wanted to install some of his extensions via their Chocolatey package. So if I go over here and look at packages again, and I search for trailing white space, which is one of the packages of his that I use, then it also suffers from the same problem in that it uses the built-in v6 installer within Chocolatey, and as a result, it doesn't work. However, what I suggested to him via a pull request was to switch away from using the built-in v6, commandlet that comes in as part of Chocolatey, and instead use the one that comes from the Chocolatey Visual Studio extension package. We would use this until the existing commandlet within Chocolatey itself gets fixed. So if we look at this package and paste that in, then this is by a community member known as Jacob. He's got a lot of packages that kind of circle around getting Visual Studio installed. And one of the things that he's created is this extension that comes with its own install Visual Studio v6 extension. So this one works for 2017, but it's also fully backwards compatible for 2015, 2013, and so on. So, long story short, if you are creating a Chocolatey package specifically for the installation of a Visual Studio extension, which we could definitely do for this package, as Manfred suggested, in the meantime, I would recommend you use this commandlet rather than the one that ships as part of Chocolatey. And I'm assuming that the comment that Kim's made there is that obviously as part of your uninstallation, you would want to remove that extension as well. Now, I didn't submit that to Mads's. Is that the Mads's? I didn't submit that to Mads repository, so that would be a pull request for someone else if they wanted to add in a Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file to actually remove the extension as well. So that would be a valid contribution. Okay, so long story short, if you get that NUnit adapter extension installed into Visual Studio, now when we go drill down into that unit test that we were looking at before, and we say run selected tests, what should happen now is that the test should actually run, and we should actually get a result back now. Okay, so here we go. So that unit test has gone all green, meaning that it's passed. Now, if we go one step further, and we're actually trying to figure out why a specific unit test or an integration test isn't working the way that we expect it to, then we can set breakpoints. So in the same way that we can debug through code as we did last week when we were debugging through and showing the different sections of the command and how they were being exercised, we can actually right-click on that same unit test and say debug. So what that will do is it will then spin up the debugger, it will launch the code and then exercise the unit test against that code, but we will then be able to also set breakpoints within the unit tests or the integration tests to see what is working and what's not working. So this is especially useful when you are maybe starting to write the unit test. Well, depends on how you write the unit tests. If you are an advocate of TDD, test-driven development, then arguably you would have written the test first before you wrote the code. I don't necessarily subscribe to that mantra, but it's definitely one of those that people have different opinions on. So I'd welcome you to do whatever makes sense for you. The reason I wanted to mention this just now is I'm not sure whether we'll get to this part, but we'll give it a try. There's a couple of things that we need to tidy up, but I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on how you can run the unit tests. And probably one of the first things that we would want to do before making any changes into the Chocolatey code base is to exercise all those unit tests to make sure that all the tests are working currently and there are no known breaking changes, and that all of the code that we're adding in hasn't affected any of the existing code that's in the repository. So all I did there was click run all. So what we should find, hopefully, is that all of these tests will run. It doesn't take too long to run them, if I remember correctly, but we'll just let that run and we'll see, hopefully, that all of those tests go green. What I will mention is that there are two test projects in the Chocolatey code base. One is for what's termed just chocolatey.tests, and the other is for chocolatey.tests.integration. The distinction being that one is unit tests for exercising the almost a lower level code, the kind of concrete functions that are being exercised and written. Integration tests are a higher level abstraction that actually will result in things happening on the file system or making network calls. You tend not to have file system calls or network calls being exercised within the unit tests, because the unit tests, you want them to be quick and happen as quickly as possible, whereas the integration tests, by their nature of making those calls, will take longer. And we're kind of already seeing that in here, that this scenarios section is taking a little while to execute, simply because it's doing those things that we spoke about. It's running things like choco list. It's exercising choco outdated. All of those commands are being exercised, so they are taking that slightly longer to execute. But it is they are getting through them. So in theory, all of those tests should go green. There's at least one in there that's got a warning. This one's saying NuGet does not handle version conflicts with highest dependency. So that's obviously a unit test. Let's have a look at that one. That's maybe a good one to have a look at. So this one has, this is a test that we at some point was working, or we wanted to work in this way, but there's an open issue here that needs to be figured out before this particular test will work as expected. So what we're seeing here is that there is a unit test. The fact but it's been marked as pending, meaning that it's not expected to execute currently. Okay, so rather than wait for that to finish, I think I'll just minimize that test explorer so that we can go back to it later to see that that's completed the way we want it to. Okay, so what we want to do today, or tonight we should say, is start to implement some more of this. Now, where we left it last week, maybe just make this a little bit bigger so that you guys can see it properly. Where we left it last week was we had a to-do here, which was to use the file system abstraction rather than direct. So what I'm referring to there is rather than calling directly out to XML writer or system.io.file or any of those direct file manipulation APIs, it's better to use file system abstraction so that allows us the opportunity to do unit tests. If we didn't have that file system abstraction in place, when it came to trying to do unit tests, we wouldn't actually be able to test the code without reaching out to the file system. So as I just explained, that's not necessarily a good idea because those tests take longer to execute. So what actually happened is after the stream last week, I had a quick conversation with Rob Reynolds, the creator of Chocolatey, just to give him a heads up on what I'd done, and then indicated to him that this is what we've done, and is this correct? Are we going down the right path? So as a result of that conversation, what ended up happening was, if I go back over here to GitHub, and I look at my repository, and it's Choco repository, then I committed everything that we did last week, and then I added that as a commit into this branch here. So this is everything that we did last week is in this commit. But what we also found, as a result of the conversation that I had with Rob, is that there's probably a helper method already existing that we can make use of. So, because one of the questions that we left outstanding was, we saw that when we ran the export command, it was actually showing the output. So in our command window, we saw the packages listed. Now, we didn't necessarily want that. So the question I had for Rob initially was, well, how do we silence that? So what he said was, to silence this, you would need to change the configuration to make it silent, which is kind of what I expected. But then checking the NuGet service to see what I mean. So I went and looked at that. But while we were looking at that, we actually saw that there was a method already that does pretty much exactly what we need. So if we go in here and search for get all installed packages, then it is a method or a private function that's available within the NuGet service. Now that's interesting though, because we might not be able to call that because it's private. So let's just have a quick look to see what it's doing again. So what we found in here was it's doing exactly what we were attempting to do. So the first was that it was setting the list command local only property to true. It was overriding the sources. It was setting the conf, and then there was another one in here, which was this one, the quiet config, the quiet output property, which silences the output to the command line, which is what we were trying to achieve. But what I'd said to Rob was perhaps it would make sense for us to just use this get all installed packages method. But I've now noticed that it's private. So where's it actually being used? Let's see if we can dig into this a little bit. So it's being called in this function, which is doing an uninstall run, which is not what we want to do. And then it's being called within the set package names to all if all is specified. So that's not something we want to do either. So the question is, can we or should we make that private function this one, should we make that public? So that's a question that I will ask of Rob later, but for now, let's go ahead and make that public. Now, do we need to put that onto the NUnit service so that it can be found? I suspect that we may do. Because what we'll get passed in. So the reason I'm thinking about this, so if you remember in the Chocolatey export command, what we passed in was an interface. So an interface of the NUnit service. So even though we've made that method public, we won't actually be able to use it yet. So we can prove that out by going down here. So if we go down to where we're using the NUnit service, which is here, and then we type NUnit service dot, and the method was called getAll, then it's not going to see it because we don't actually have an instance of the NUnit service to code against. We've only got the interface. So in order for that public method to flow through into the interface, we would need to update its definition to include that new method. So let's just go ahead and do that for the purposes of what we're going to do here. So I'm just going to grab the definition, which is this one. And then we're going to need a chocolate config. We should be able to get that as well. So if we go up to this package definition and paste this in, then that's going to need a using statement for generic, and let's just add in some get all installed packages, and then that's got a param name of config, which is going to be the configuration. Let's just copy what was done before, and then the returns is kind of implied by the name of the function, so I'm not going to include that just now. Okay, so now that we've included that, we should now be able to see that within our, so over here. So now we can say get all installed packages, and it wants our chocolate configuration, which we've already got passed into this function. So in theory, we should be able to do var package results. And type. Let's do package results is equal to that. So where we were doing it before using the list run function of the NUnit service, and we had to set that configuration up so that it worked correctly. So previously we had done this. So we said list command local only in order to force that to be true. Now, what we can do here is we shouldn't need to set that anymore, because that will be handled by the usage of this get all installed packages instead. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go and check to make sure that everything's saved, and then let's have a look at the properties of this to ensure that we're still running the export command. We are. So we'll set a breakpoint on there, which we've got. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get out. Oh, I'm going to build error. I've forgotten a semicolon. So on my interface definition, I need a semicolon there. Otherwise, it won't compile. Dang it. So obviously, Kim's told me exactly what the problem was there, but there was a slight delay, so I hadn't read the comment until I got into that same conclusion. But thank you, I appreciate it. So now within package results, we've still got those two packages which we have installed. So if I remember correctly, there was a Winderstat and .NET version detector. Yep. So there's two packages there, and if we go back to our command line, what we're seeing here is we're not seeing the list of packages being output to the command line anymore, and that's what we were seeing before. So we fixed 2 of the issues that we're having straight away. So that's good. So if we go back in here and let that run through, or let's just check in our C temp folder. So over here in temp, there currently is one, which is the one from last week. So if we let that run through, then we've got a package.config file there, which we can say open with code. And in theory, we should have those 2 entries that we do. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So what we can do here is, there was one to make it silent. Don't output the list of packages to the console. So we fixed that one. That stopped debugging. So we can get rid of that to do, because we've done that one. And the next thing I wanted to do was to look at the writing of the file to the file system. So again, as of right now, I've got an XML writer.create, which is taking, it's writing directly to the file system, which is not what we want. What we want instead is, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of a tricky situation, because I have to remember what I want to do. I think what I want to do instead is build up the XML file in memory and then write the contents of that XML document to a file rather than anything else. So the first thing I want to do is figure out how we should be writing the file to the file system. So we can do that by having a look at some of the other commands. So this is, if in doubt about anything in Chocolatey, there's probably almost something. You should clean up commented out configuration to list. So there's a comment there from Maurice in the chat room. You're referring to this part here. Yes, you're absolutely right. Let's take that part out because we don't need that anymore. Because that's being done within that method now that we're calling. Absolutely correct. What I was saying was, if in doubt about anything of how to do things in Chocolatey, in the Chocolatey codebase, I would encourage you to look at the Chocolatey codebase, because there's almost an example of doing what you want to do. So in this scenario, I want to write a file to the file system. Okay. Now, to show something in action, so if we go back over here, and how can I show you this easily? Let's go to our actual Chocolatey installation. So that's in C, program data, Chocolatey. Then let's have a look in the lib folder, and let's look at Beartail. Okay, so Beartail is there. If we go to our PowerShell command prompt, and we say, one of the command that we kind of been using as where to start with this is the pin command and the list command. So if we do choco pin Beartail, then unknown command Beartail, that's going to work, so I need to give it a name. So that's going to be -n. Let me take a guess. Okay. What that should have done, if I refresh that, is it put it up here? I thought I was in the wrong place. I'm going to go in here. No. It is already set by the methods. You don't think it's necessary. Yeah. I expected that to do something, but it doesn't seem to have done it. Choco pin. Choco pin. Oh, it's add. Look, I'm missing the command. Okay. That's not working how I expect it to work. Let's carry on. So I expected that to error, but if I got the command wrong, but it didn't. So chocopin add name equals Beartail. if I run that, trying to add pin for Beartail, successfully added pin. So what that did was, so it did put it where I thought it was going to go. So now in our Chocolatey folder in the Beartail, you'll see that there's this .pin folder. What it's done there is it's added a file to the file system to indicate that that package is pinned, right? So it's not exactly what we want to do, but it has written a file to the file system. And we can use that same code that is being exercised within that choco pin command to do the creation of the file and the writing to the file system that we want to achieve. So if we go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and remove that pin again, just so that I don't have to remember about this. So it is remove. So if I just do that, where did it go? There. And let's go ahead and remove that one. So that .pin file should go away, which it did. So now we can find that same code in the code base. We can use that code in where we want it. So this is just an example of how you can build on the existing code to deliver what you actually want to achieve. So if we go into the pin command itself, so over here in infrastructure app, in commands, let's find the pin command. And we know that from what we've already been working on, things happen as part of the run virtual method that's exposed as part of the I command interface. If we go down here, then we'll see that really the pin is getting created here in the set pin method. So if we go and have a look at that, then what we'll see in here is there's a few things happening, but if we drill down, the one that we're interested in is save package information. So here we're specifying onto this object is pinned, and it's saying is adding a pin. So it's this property that's been inspected, and that is being passed into here. So if we right click and go to implementation on that, then down here there will be some code which is here. So if package information is pinned, then we are using the file system abstraction, which I spoke about briefly last week, and we'll come on to it more today. And we're going to use the write file method, and what it's got being passed into it. If we look at this, then it wants a file path where to store the file, and then the text to go into it, and then an encoding. So this is the function that I think we're going to want to write to use, and it's using the file system abstraction. So we have a quick look at this, and we'll see that this is of type iFileSystem, and iFileSystem comes from it is a function that is implemented. It's an interface that's implemented, and it has all of the kind of top level I/O functions that you would expect: combine paths, write files, get paths to executables, create directories, delete directories, all of the top level things that you would expect to be able to perform on the file system. But again, it's done as a interface so that you can code against that for on a unit test perspective, rather than coding directly against the file system. So that's what we're going to use. So we're going to need a file system passed in that we can actually make use of. So we're going to need to have that iFileSystem interface being passed in, and we'll just call that file system. So we're going to create a new private read-only iFileSystem. We'll find out where that comes from in a bit. File system, and then let's just set that equal to that. Then we have something that we can use within our code. So let's see if this knows what it is. Using Chocolatey infrastructure file system, which sounds right. So now we have that set at the top level. Down here, we should be able to make use of it. So we can go then file system dot, and what we spoke about was writing a file. And that writing file takes a file path and some text to put into it. So let's just test to see if that's going to do what we want. So let's just hard code that for just now. C temp packages one.config .config. Text to put into it, we'll just put in Bob, and then what is encoding? So I wanted encoding. It's obviously not there yet. Dot. That's what I want. System.text. And then in there, we can then just call it ASCII. Okay, so that simple method should end up with a new file in the file system. So let's just quickly test to make sure that that's working how we expect it to. So let's go an error. Oh, that's okay. That makes sense. So let's just bring that open. That's where the file should go. There are build errors. Why are there build errors? There are build errors because I added this iFile system into the constructor of the Chocolatey export command. And what we need to be able to do is we need to pass that in. Otherwise, it won't work. So if we go back over to here where we've instantiated the Chocolatey export command, then we haven't given it the information we need. So if we go over here and find an instance of the file system, which we can get from our container, get an instance of a file system, and that should get us what we need. So now if we run this again, and let's just step through it. So step into that, and then we're going to write the file. So straight away, having done that, we've now got packages one.config, and then that has the text Bob in it. Okay, nice and simple. So what we need to do now is we need to figure out how we can create a object in memory, an XML file in memory, and then take the generated text from that and write it into this file. So I know what I want to do, but let's just have a quick check. I think what I want to do is I want to instantiate an XML document. And that XML document, I know that has a save method on it, but I don't necessarily want the save method. I want, where does write to go to? Write to writer. That would be a stream. It's not necessarily what we want either. Let me have a think. Further, any other? Can this file system abstraction take a stream? I wonder. Let's have a quick look and see what's on here again. File system dot. So I'm seeing that Manfred's just written something into the chat, which is pointing me out to Stack Overflow. I shall read that in a minute. I just want to check to see if there's nothing else obvious in the file system abstraction that we could have used. Let's have a look at what Manfred's found. Okay, perfect. So I was initially dubious of what you'd link to there, Manfred, but I think this is going to be exactly what we want. So what's happening here, let's just make this a little bit bigger, is, so in the same way, right now we're using an XML writer create, but that's creating it directly onto the file system. What this code is doing is it's using the exact same code, but it's using a string writer instead of a text writer. So I believe this XML writer create by default will, under the hood, will use a text writer for writing files to the file system, whereas this one is using a string writer, and it's writing the contents of the XML into that string writer, and then we can use the stringbuilder.toString method to get that information out that we want. So that sounds like exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and grab these two using statements, and let's stick them into here. Because the first thing I'm going to change is I personally don't really like this directly flowing from one using into another. That doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't look right. I tend to write it like this. It's a bit more text on the page, and it takes up a bit more space. But I personally think it makes more sense. But again, different people, different opinions. So the string writer will just need a reference to I wonder. String writer, why is that system.io? That one may be difficult to test in isolation as well, but let's run with that just now. I think we'll run with this just now. And now that we've got an XML writer, in theory, we should be able to just use the exact same code that we had before. So let's just cut this from here and put it into here. And to save more writing, let's just change this to be xwriter. And let's remove this. In fact, let's copy this. I know it's actually pretty much exactly the same as what we've already got. So let's delete that. And then what we want to do is we want to take this. Let's go here. And after the for each and after we write that, let's put this into here. And we'll use the same hard-coded packages.config files we had before, but rather than put Bob in here, we're going to look at the code that Manfred pointed us to, which was this. So if we copy that and put that into here, then that line's getting a little bit long for what we've got just now. So let's just put them on individual lines. So what we've got here is still hard coding the file name, but instead of writing directly to the file system, we're getting the string value from the string writer, and we are then putting it onto the file system. So let's delete both of these files that we were testing with before, and let's go ahead and run that. Let's go ahead and run that. Exit with 0, press enter to continue, beautiful. And then over here, we've got a packages.config file. And if we open that code up, it doesn't work. But I think Maurice has just pointed out why. Because we haven't flushed the writer, which is what the Stack Overflow command code snippet was doing. So down here, if we flush that with XW, then we run that again. Let's see what that gives us. Then over here, we should, this time, oh, it's not reserved. Interesting. I thought we put that on the XML writer settings. There is a after use. So Kim's asking in the chat room there. I think you can also add the write file call after the using statement. I actually don't think you can, Kim. If we try that, then the string writer will actually be out of scope. So if we go ahead and cut that, just to prove that out, it will go out of scope as a result of this closing of the using. Or are you referring to this first one? First one? Yes, you could do there. Yes, absolutely. So outside of the first using, yes, but not outside of the second one. So here we can do that. So that we could move out of there. Now there is a... Is it on the XML writer itself? xw.preserve. There is a preserve white space. I'm wondering whether that's on the XML document. I'm remembering now. XML document. Preserve white space. It is, look. I wonder if there's any mention of that here. I mean, it's not a showstopper, but that file is simply not as easy to read from a human perspective than otherwise. So maybe there's something in the calls that we're making when creating an XML text writer. Oh, here. Is that what you're saying, that there's a on here? Oh, look at that. New XML writer settings. What have we got in there? Is there a preserve white space in there? Indent. Gets or sets a value indicating whether to indent elements. New line of attributes. So we want that to be true, I would imagine. Indent chars, new line chars. Oh! Oh! Did we lose that? I wonder. Line 69. Yes, maybe. Let's just give that a try. Were we not using that? Maybe we missed that when we pulled that over from the original code. That's fine though. Thank you very much, Maurice. See, this is why I have extra pairs of eyes in this stream. It's more helpful than you would know. It's a completely different scenario when you are trying to write the code whilst explaining it. It's just mind-boggling how different it is. So I do appreciate you getting involved. Let's look at this and see if that helps. Haha, look at that. Perfect. Perfect. Right. Thank you very much, buddies. So now that's obviously easier to read, absolutely, than it was before. So that's getting closer to where we want it to be. I just wanted to mention one thing while I had a quick glance at Twitter there, and I wanted to mention something just to say thanks. So one of the things that I added on this episode is I've now changed my name up here on Twitter to indicate that I'm live on Twitch. So Veronica Geek, who's in the chat room as well, and who's away to be starting her own stream very shortly, I'm told, on all things SharePoint and Office 365, explained to me how I could do this from my Stream Deck. So I appreciate that, because what I'm now doing, now when I start a stream, I click a button, and that button automatically tweets on my behalf here saying that I'm away to start my stream. And it also changes my name to provide an indication that I am live on Twitch. And I have another button that does exactly the same thing, but in reverse. So it will send a tweet out when I'm finished, and it will change my name back to what I normally have it, which is just my name. And I guess they're showing up on the page now. So these are my two daughters, Olivia and Amelia, who are currently swimming, or not currently, but these were their underwater photo shoots that they did when they were a little bit younger. So these are two of my favourite photos of my girls, mainly because they look so alike when they're under the water, and they both got their tongue sticking out. So yeah, those are my kids. I'm going to close that again. Okay, so now we have that working the way we wanted to. So we're doing things in a better way, in the sense that we've got an abstraction of the file system, but we've still got this hard-coded file name here. So we need to work on that, and we also need to work on this to do here, which is to whether or not to optionally include the package version number in the generated output. So what we want to do is we need to handle some additional arguments passed in. Now, we spoke about last week that we would need to add in a new option set. So those are the command line parser that's being used within Chocolatey has this concept of predefining the arguments that are allowed to be passed in. So we can see that in action if we look at the choco pin command. Then up here, under here, there will be option sets, and those option sets are exactly as I've said. So, so in this example, on the pin command, it expects that there will be let's just type it out while we've got it open. So we've got a choco pin, and then we saw it with add, and then it expects either shorthand notation of -n, or it expects that it will be named as name. And there's also another one in there for a parameter called version. So by specifying these option sets, the command line parser will automatically parse those arguments for us. We won't have to do anything else in order for those to be available. Okay. Now, the only thing that I can't remember is whether or not those have options for whether or not they are optional or not. So we may want to, because I think what we want to do is we want to, it must be actually, because this version wasn't necessary when I ran the pin command earlier. So yeah, I think we're okay. So what we'll do is we'll just grab this option set as it currently stands, and we will pull that into the export command that we're working on. And let's go ahead and paste this in, and we'll see where we get to. So obviously it's not going to be name. What had I thought about it being? I thought about it being output file name, so maybe O, and then this could be output file name, and then the other one is going to be include version numbers. wondering whether there is a system. So the thing that's going through my head just now is existing parameters that can be passed into chocolate commands. So if we look at, say, the install command, then there are a list of common switches that are passed in to all chocolate commands. So options and switches, default options and switches. So there's already a D, a V, a Y, an F, an R, C. Okay, so there's no O, so we're fine with that. Minus I. Does that make sense for include? I don't think I'm going to have a short one, a short notation for the additional parameter. I'm going to just call this what I've got here, which is include version numbers. Now, the one thing that came up in conversation with Rob was, do you think, this is a question for everyone on the chat, do you think it makes sense to include the version numbers by default, or should they be an optional add-in? I.e., should this be an include version numbers, or should it be an exclude version numbers? Because it's going to be a Boolean switch, one way or the other. So, which one is it to include it, or is it to exclude it? So we've got a response there from Kim saying, not really, optional in my opinion. So I'm not clear on which way you've landed on there, Kim. Can you help me out? So should it be, let's do it this way. Should it be include version numbers, or should it be exclude version numbers? Show of hands. Include. There's one vote for include. Optionally include version numbers. So that's 2 votes for include. And then let's just get Manfred's as well. Manfred, is it include or exclude? And then anyone else who wants to have a say, this is your opportunity to have a direct impact on the code that's going into Chocolatey Codebase. I'll go with the flow. Perfect, Manfred. Thank you very much. So we're going to go with include then. So this is going to be the, let's just put some words in here, output file name. It's not going to be a file name, is it? Output file path, I think. Output file path. The path to where the list of currently installed packages. The path to where the list of the currently installed packages should be saved. So that. And we will say defaults to packages.config. Okay, defaults to, that's just a spelling mistake, packages.config. And then we want to have that go to the export command. And it's going to be a property called, we haven't got a property yet, but let's just keep it the same. So this is going to be output file path. I did see your, so not quite sure how you did that, but Maurice has highlighted some code and it's become red in my chat that I'm looking at here. I saw the comment. I'm going to come back to it once I've finished this thought process. I haven't forgotten about it, I promise. Yes, you're both correct. There's, I believe that there is. Okay, fine. Let's just do that. Let's do it now. I think what you're referring to is that there's an additional encoding that can be set on. So the file itself is being written with ASCII here, but there was on the create, I think, I saw second I saw it. I saw it somewhere. There is an encoding here that we can put as. So does ASCII make sense? That's probably another question. I'm so far removed from actually knowing the correct way of doing file encoding. It's something that always trips me up. So if you guys have an opinion on that, I would welcome it. But I think what we're going to see is this might change it. See, that statement's along the lines of XML8 without BOM. Yeah, I don't really know what that means. I'll be honest. It's not something. I'm not a computer scientist by trade. I've never dug into that. So, oh, you want UTF-8 there? We can do that. That would see again. I'm going to let you guys discuss it, and I'm going to come back once I've got my code actually building again, and we can test it. So include version numbers. We're going to put here. Include version numbers is going to be a configuration export command, and we're going to add a new property on there that's going to be include version numbers, and then we're going to give this include version numbers controls whether or version numbers for each package appear in generated file. And we're going to say include version numbers defaults to false. Okay, so now we need to go to our export command and we need to add on some properties. So in here, so last week we created the shell of the export command configuration. We didn't actually add anything into it. Now we're taking the opportunity to add in some additional configuration that will allow us to control how the code is executed. So in here, we're going to want a property, which is a Boolean property, and it was going to be called include version numbers. And then you're going to want another one, which was a path. So let's make it a string just now. And then it was going to be output file path. So if we jump back to there, both of those should now be resolved. Option, remove. And then that wants to be a Boolean. So let's just have a quick look at how that is being handled. In fact, we should be able to do that here. Final references. Set config item. That's not so what I'm looking for here really is just to see how the conversion to the Boolean is done. Again, so it's reusing the same code base again and making it consistent rather than just doing it how it might normally do it. So we are seeing where that's being converted, which is slightly surprising. Let's find the list command. Where's the list command configuration? send directly. So is it just there? I just check. That's one that features. So that's not what I want to do that. Let's just. I mean, I could just do a bool.try parse or a bool.parse. Let's just do it this way just now, and then we can come back to it. Okay. Well, that's not going to work. Set a breakpoint on that. No, it's something in there. There's a lambda. Let's just have a look at the command that I was just had open. Here, virus check is in the features configuration. So the features configuration will have a feature command. And then the feature command, we must have an option set. And that option set will is why is that not doing what I think it should do? Maurice has just put something in the chat room. Let's just see what's being referred to here. Look at that. So, new command, use original template, which I'm assuming is a boolean, is then just whether or not the option is there or not. So option is not equal to null. That sounds exactly like what we want as well. Let's close off some of these. Export command, include version numbers is equal to option not equal to null. And I've got an extra equal on there. Get rid of that in a second. It's in JavaScript land. Okay, that feels better to me. Okay, so now that we have those, and my code, I think, compiles now, if it does, then we'll go back to our UTF-8 discussion. Okay, so reading back up a little bit, we're saying that the encoding should be UTF-8. That will be there, and then there's a link out to some Stack Overflow stuff. So let's just see what's going on in this Stack Overflow post. So in the XML text writer, which we're also using, new UTF encoding and false. We're not using an X document, so I don't think we'll be able to pass that part in. But let's just see if we look at the text writer. So down here, That was an XML text writer. This is an XML writer. So as a very minimum, I think what you're suggesting is I go up here and I change this to be UTF-8, correct? And then I'm gonna let's just give it a try and see what that does. I don't think that's going to change the XML declaration, but let's see what we get out of it anyway. Let's open this VS Code. So we've still got encoding UTF-816, but it is a UTF-8 file down here. So that's at least halfway there, correct? Okay, so you're suggesting no, you want to use. So we're suggesting here then. Oh, it's not there. New UTF-8 encoding false is what you're suggesting. Yes, I agree. I don't think that'll change the declaration. So on start document, is there, I wonder if there's one on here for standalone. So XML writer. XML writer, XML declaration, encoding. Omit XML declaration, and then the write processing instruction. Okay, people. Write processing instruction. Is that before or after the start? xw.write processing instruction. String name and text. XML. So what encoding do we want it to be in that top level, or do we just not want it? Do we just want XML in version 1? Because what this is suggesting is what is that? Let's just grab this. Let's see if this changes it. XML version 1, blah blah. Don't like to look at that at the end though. Surely that part's not needed. It would be clean if it matched UTF-8. Okay. UTF-8. I don't like that it put this on the end when it doesn't have it at the start. But let's give it a try, shall we? I'm open to give it a try. Let's delete that one though. Oh, I've taken out the breakpoint, so... This is bad, but it works. Don't like the sound of that. Token start document in state document would result in an add valid XML document. Okay. Let's have a look at Maurice's follow-up here. I feel we're getting sidetracked a little bit, but let's give it a try. Yeah, let's not do that, Maurice. No, let's not do that. I don't like that. I already don't like that. Let's no. Yeah, I just had the same thought, Kim, about removing that from the end, because I had a feeling that might not be right. But let's give it a try. No, that didn't work either. Token start document in state document would result in an invalid XML document. So it's telling me exactly. Let's just remove some of this and see where we get to, shall we? If this doesn't work, we'll table this for now. We'll go back to what we're actually trying to achieve just now, because this is secondary, I think, to what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so I'm going to comment this part out, and we shall do this as a to-do. You have made incorrect quoting for the attributes. Okay, so Kim, one more try. What are you suggesting that we should have in here then? You had a single quote before the equal sign. Did I? I did have that, and that was a copy paste from the previous one. So yes, there is a there. Okay. One more try. One more try. If it doesn't work this time, I'm giving up on it. Right? We agree? No. Version 1 encoding UTF-8 writer dot write processing instruction XML version. Okay, I'm giving up, boys. I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna put this and to do figure out how to do declaration properly. Right. Okay. Okay, so going back to what we're actually trying to achieve, it's probably the right start. But what? Why? As in, I should take it out? Hold on, what did that do? Where's my file? It's created a file. What's in the file? Oh, look at that. Look at that. Okay. So, okay. That was Manfred. Well done. Thank you very much. Are we happy with this? Or should these be these? Or does it matter? Do you care? I'm going to leave it. Okay. Okay. Okay, now it's going to annoy me if I leave them with single quotes now, though. Hold on. This is going to be my own OCD kicking in now. So let's fix this. To be, where's my? And let's escape that and escape that as well. Okay, one more try. Delete that package. Nope, that's not what we want to do. We want to delete that one and run it one more time. If we don't get to the unit testing this evening, this is why we didn't get unit tests. So as long as we're all on the same page, let's just open this with code one more time, and we've got boom, version 1 encoding UTF-8. We've got UTF down here, and I think everything is fine now. Are we agreed? Final say. I'm waiting before I move on. No one replies. Now you can write a UT if the encoding in the XML matches the actual encoding. I don't understand. I'm showing my ignorance now. Now you can write a UT. What's a UT? Are we talking about a Unicode character? Now you can write a. So is this the? Oh, unit test. Ah, there we go. I think that's probably a good idea. Yes. I'm clearly not on the same page as everyone else. So we can write a unit test if the encoding in the XML matches the actual encoding. Yes, we absolutely could do that. That would be an integration test though, because that would rely on it creating the file on the file system. So that wouldn't be a unit test, that would be an integration test. Slight difference, but that's fine. Perfectly valid. Yes. So let's go ahead and close this out and go back to here. So I can remove this comment now because we've done that, and turns out we don't need the start document. And we've got a to-do in here, which is add parameter to specify whether to include the version number or not. So we've got that parameter on our configuration object now. So our configuration object is passed in here. So in theory, in here, we should be able to do if configuration dot export command dot include version numbers, then we would do something like this. So we're saying if the export commands including the include version numbers, then we want to take the package. Oh, we changed that name last week, didn't we? It was package result dot package dot version dot toString because we changed it. We changed the name. Originally, we had it as a package being returned up here, or we had packages being returned here on line 74. But this was actually returning a list of package results that contained a package. So we changed the name to match that. So in theory, if I do this again, so over here, let's delete that packages.config again, and run that, we should see no difference. We should see absolutely no difference because we haven't set that parameter. So over here on packages.config, we should still have just the ID being shown, which we do. Beautiful. However, if we go up to our here, where we're running the export command, what we should find is if we do include version was it number or numbers? What have we forgot? Export commands, option set, include version numbers. Singular or plural? Include version. I think numbers is right. Numbers, yes, I agree. I agree, Kim. So if we do include version numbers, oh, that generated a error. Why did that? I wonder. Well, set some breakpoints to see what's going on there. Include version numbers equals. Okay. So it was there that caused it to throw an error. So let's do that again. Let's go here. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's required, Maurice. That was a direct copy from the option sets over here. So it is looking for that equals sign. Although you're talking about this one, yes, Maurice gets a prize. I don't know what that prize is, but you've got it. I think you have the nail on the head. So if I remove that and run it again, what we should find is it becomes a flag rather than an argument with an expected value. So now we don't see the error message, or we don't get directed to the help message, and instead we get that. And if we go to packages.config and view code, then in theory we've now got a version attribute on each of our XML elements there. Oh, sorry. Absolutely sorry, I didn't see Kim's earlier message. Sorry. Yes, both of you get a prize. In fact, let's go over here. Where are we? Let's go here, and let's do hiring worm plus, and we'll do that. MK given our. There we go. We have some virtual prize giving shenanigans going on in Gitter right now. So thank you very much. Where was I? So we had a comment here which was handle parsing of output file name and include version numbers, which we have done. So we've got rid of that to do as well. Update top row. I haven't done that one yet. Thank you very much. What we need to do is we need to not hard code the file path anymore. So currently we are hard coding this C temp choco packages.config. Oh, that's not true. That's not true at all. I didn't miss that comment. That's not true. Now what we could do is just stick this directly into here and say output file path. But that feels a little bit wrong to me for a couple of reasons. One is that we've said that will default to packages.config file, which we haven't done. So we should up here say if that dot what is that giving me back? It's extension on option. I was expecting to see something different on there. So expecting to see another function on there. Yes, absolutely, Maurice. That's what I'm suggesting. So the default should be to output to your own current working directory. So what I'm suggesting there is that the file path is simply packages.config file for default, and then that will output to where choco.exe is currently being executed from. Absolutely. We should test that. Good time to see if choco.exe is using the current working directory or it's using the module. So I had that was effectively the thought process that was just running through my head, man. We should be able to test that quite easily. But I'm going to cheat a little bit here. This is not what I want to write, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. Is null or white space that, and if it is a null or white space, then we're just going to use packages.config. Otherwise, we're going to use option dot. That's probably not the best either, but let's wing it just now. We're going to stick it in there. Okay. Oh, I've missed something. I think it's a closing bracket. Better. Okay. So down here, at this point, it should be packages.config. I'm going to take that command line out, and I'm going to run this. So output file path is null. That's unexpected. Why is that null? If null or white space, it should be or that. Why? How can you be null? You can't be null. You're lying. Oh, because that's only going to work if there is a value. Meaning, okay, so that's not where we want to do that at all. Then that's not what we want to do there at all. That was Maurice. Absolutely, yes. We just had the same thought process again. So that code isn't there. So this is where we would put in this is where we'd start to use these additional arguments. So this code is called after this one, if I recall correctly. So the configure argument parser is yes. So configure argument parser is called, and then in here it'll be handle additional argument parsing. So at this point, we know that we would have no unparsed arguments, and we could look to see if the configuration. Let's just put this in the watch window down here, which it already is. So down here, we would be able to see whether the configurations dot. Why not set a default value in the configuration? Well, I don't know. Does it have a default option? Let's see if there's more things that we can put in here. So for each option, there is an option. Prototype in action. So we're using the prototype description and the action. So based on what I'm seeing here, when you define the option sets in your configuration class, I see where you're going. What you're saying is, if we go over here and we look for export command configuration, having a default value here. I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure if I want to put it in there. And I will tell you for why. Although it is done there. The thought process I was having there, Maurice, was whether or not it's more readable to have that done in the command itself to know why that's been set, or whether it is better to have it in the configuration. So I saw at least one example where it was defaulting at least one example where it was defaulting the page size for one of these functions in here. So based on that, I think I'm happy to proceed. So if we go in here and create a constructor for this one, then we'll set output file path is going to be equal to packages.config. Okay, so now if we run this, I've lost that closing bracket, or I've added, there we go. Now if I run this, in theory, we should have, let's remove that breakpoint, we're finished with that one, and where we were was down here. Let's run this to that point again. Run this to that point. Then our output file path should be packages.config. Beautiful. And if we run this, it should work, but it will no longer be writing to there. And I'm almost, yeah, because it's 1:43. It's not 1:43. I don't know what time zone this is on. This hasn't been updated since 1:31, which is a good few minutes ago. But now, if we look at another Windows Explorer, and we go and have a look and see GitHub, organizations, Chocolatey, Choco, and I suspect that in source, Chocolatey console, bin, debug, then in here, I'm expecting that there would be a packages.config file that was just written at 1:43. I'm expecting that this one is going to be the one that just got created, which is this one. So as a sanity check, let's go ahead and delete that packages.config file, and then let's run that again. So the reason it's going in there is because that's the choco.exe it's being executed as part of the build process, as part of the debug process. So if we run that, then that packages.config file got recreated. Okay? Now, to test this further, to see how this is, yep, that's exactly where we're going. Change your current working, yeah, we can do it that way. I was going to do it a different way, but let's do it that way. Start options, working directory to PC, temp. Save that, and then let's run this again. And then in theory, this time around, we should get one back in here. Let's see. Haha! So that is working how I want it to work, I think. Right? So to test this further, we would need to go and include version numbers and minus O equals, let's write that out properly, C temp bob.config. If we run that, then what we should get is output file path is going to be bob.config. If I run that, then we should get a new bob.config up created. Look at that. That has, hopefully, the version numbers and the packages contained within it. Okay. So, the final question that I have regarding this, and I think I'm going to draw it to a close at that point, and we're not going to get to the unit test tonight. The final question that I have that I'm putting out to the floor is, what should happen if that file already exists on the file system? So if I run this again with bob.config, then I suspect that what will happen right now is it will overwrite that file. And we can verify that. So right now that bob.config on the file system includes the version numbers. So if we take off that flag, then it should generate a file that doesn't have the version numbers. Query if it should be overridden. Okay, but let's see what happens first of all. So first of all, did it overwrite it just now? I suspect that it did, and it overwrote it without the version numbers in it. Oh, well that's broken. Oh, no, it hasn't overwritten the file. It has appended to the file. And that's bad. We definitely need to fix that. That definitely needs to happen. I'm going to install that update later. I'm going to do that now. So the question is, should it prompt to overwrite the file, or should it error that the file already exists? Appending is bad. I agree with you, Manfred. But you could think so. So the force command, yes, that's where I was going. So what I'm thinking is, I'm not even going to say it because Manfred's written it. I would suggest, I think has a great point. Yes. Okay. So what we'll do is, if the file exists on the file system, we will halt execution with an error and say can't overwrite, not overwriting file, to preserve the file that is there. And what the user can then do is use the force option to force the overwriting of that file. Beautiful. But what we will need to do is we will need to figure out why the write file, let's see, was there any additional properties on the write file method? Because that's not really doing what I would expect it to do. There are two overloads available. Let's have a quick look and see what's on here. Oh, there was a stream look. Alright. The deferred function of getting the stream. I could have used that. Might have to come back to that later. Might have to come back to that one later. So what I'm thinking then is we delete the file as a sanity check. So let's quickly put that in. So blah blah blah. So before we do anything, actually, the first thing that we'll do is we'll check to see whether the file exists on the file system. So we will do file system dot file exists, and that's going to be the path. So configuration dot export command dot output file path. If it exists, we are going to raise an error. And the error is going to be raised by throwing an exception, I suspect. Asking encoding uses one byte per character. So the right file still has ASCII as the encoding parameter. I think that might be an issue. Okay, hold on. You're saying that the right file does still have ASCII. Yes, it does. So we want this to be the UTF-8, correct? UTF-8 by default uses 1, 2 when needed. Right file system. Oh, okay. Maurice is saying no, no, no. Why are you saying no, no, no? Or you want me to have new encoding, new UTF-8 encoding, UTF-8 encoding false, so it matches the other one. Is that what you're going to tell me you want? There we go. Right, we got there. Okay, I should probably look at this to see what's that false parameter actually doing. Encoder should emit UTF-8 identifier. We're setting that false. Okay. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take your guys' advice, and I'm going to go with it. What I wanted to do was throw an error. Okay. There we go. I think what we should do next time is just have Maurice doing the stream, and I'll just sit in the chat room and we'll see how we get on, because yeah, it's been an interesting all day. So what we'll do, a quick test here, we'll just say throw new exception, file already exists, right? Now, if file system exists and not configuration dot force, then we throw an exception. If it does exist, keep in mind I'm a system. Well, for a systems engineer, you're coming up with lots of valid points regarding the C# code that I'm trying to write. So I think you're a little bit more than just a system engineer. So what we're going to do there is var file exists. Let's just take this out as a variable. Cut this out and stick this up here. If that exists, we'll keep that as a variable. If file exists and we're not forcing it, then we're going to throw an exception. So that's the early return. Then what we're going to want to do is another one that says if file exists. This is probably not the cleanest way of doing it. We'll just test it out just now. If file exists, we will then just simply do file system dot delete file, and then that's going to be configuration dot export command dot output file. Right? So if the file exists and we're not forcing, then we throw an exception. If the file does exist and we are forcing, we will delete it, because that will be true. Yes, it will. We could definitely tidy that up. but let's just test to see if this works to start with. So we've currently got bob.config as the name, and if we run this, it should throw an exception. File already exists. So obviously we need to clean that up to make it have more information on what's going on. But if we go into here and we say force, then what should happen is that file should get deleted. So it should have been deleted, so it did. That file got deleted, and now if we run it, we should get a new file, which should correctly have, there we go. So as a sanity check of that, before I come back to the comments, if I go back to here and remove this force, but we'll say include version numbers, run that, then we should get a file that includes the version numbers in it. And then we'll do it once more. Oh no, because it's already got that on it. Because it's deleting it. So we can't actually test it anymore. No, we can't. We can't. Let's just remove it manually. So let's go back to that test that we did. So let's go ahead and delete this manually. Oh, we can't prove what I want to do. Okay, I think this is working the way I want it to now. One last test. So we'll include the version numbers. Which has where did code go? Version numbers, and then if we say overwrite, which is here, with the force, and we take the version numbers off again, we should, I'm almost sure that this is going to work really good now. But let's run it anyway. Then in our here, beautiful, beautiful. False parameter says to bomb. Okay, so Kim's comment there in the chat is the false parameter that I was looking at before. This one here is just to say whether to output the bomb. Is the bomb bill of materials, or is it that actually means something else? By the way, I think you should delete it right before writing. That way, if there is an issue, the old file will stay. That's a good point. The reason I did it that way, Maurice, is the reason I did it that way was I didn't want to do all this work of enumerating all the packages to then check to see if the file's there and then only then fail. So I avoiding doing all of this work when we know we can't write the file without the force parameter was why I failed early. You make a valid point about whether it works at all. Maybe what we need to do is back up the file. So I know we do that in a couple of other places. I think only if force is set. So if the file exists and we're not forcing, then it will throw an exception. If the file exists, line 79 to 82, yep. Yeah, I'm not sure if it should though. I really don't. Oh no, I see what you're saying, okay. If the file exists, so you're saying this one. You're saying take this out. So we're throwing here, if the file exists and we're not forcing, we're going to throw an exception. If we do either of those things, if either of those things are not the case, then we're going to do all of those things and we're going to delete it. But I think you make yes, I think you're correct. just before, well, you see, it would need to go here. If file exists, we do it in there. But I think what we should probably do, and let's maybe make a note of this, to do, instead of deleting directly, move to backup. Now that becomes complicated because then you might have multiple backup files or something else. That's something to worry about for another day. I think we're at a point, because I'm going to call it quits soon, because I need to clean the house. I think we have a much better export command. So we're handling some additional parameters. We know where we're outputting the file path to now. We are controlling whether or not we're putting version numbers into the file system, into the file. We are using a file system abstraction, so we're not writing directly to the file system. We have still got a couple of to-dos in the code. They're more around kind of adding the help to the actual command. There's one up here for help. So there's 2 help commands left that we need to figure out. We need to implement the no-op. So that's basically to output to the file system, output to the command line what would happen if we ran the command, but actually just don't run the command at all. So we'll see in the pin command, as an example, the no-op would do something along the lines of pin would have called blah with other options, blah, blah, blah. So we would want to write a similar command, similar output to this to say export command would have been called with in specifying whether the include version number is included and the output file path is included as well. So we'd want to, that's a simple one to do. And then obviously the other thing that we haven't done yet is the unit test and the integration test. So I did have a quick look earlier in the tests folder, and in the infrastructure app section in commands, there's examples of running specs for the list command and the pin command. So we should be able to borrow heavily from both of those specs to write some specs for the export command to exercise all the code execution paths that we spoke about. So we spoke about ensuring that UTF-8 was correctly written into the XML file. Those are the kind of things that we could write unit tests for. But it would be more around knowing whether if the commands are set, if the arguments are passed in, that they've been accepted correctly, that the configuration has been set up correctly. All those are the things that we want to be writing unit tests for. That's an interesting one, Kim. So what you're suggesting, if I've understood you correctly, what you're suggesting is in the export command, no-op, it would output the XML that would have been generated. I'm not sure about that one. That would be potentially a lot of XML being output to the console. And I don't necessarily think that would be expected from a no-op. Maybe it would. But it would also mean, and it's not impossible, that would mean a refactoring of the code to move all of the code we've currently got in the run into a method that we can call both from the no-op and from the run. That's not a bad thing. Similar to how install command output the content of a package. Choco install fiddler. No-op. Look at that. I could get on board with that. I would be happy to do that. There's no reason that we couldn't do that. It would, like I say, it would just be a small refactoring of the code to include to move that functionality around. And so is Manfred writing another potential use case for installing Cake Mist? Use case for installing Cake Mist. I'm confused by that. Manfred, run that by me again. What do I miss? I'm going to put a note in here, implement this, perhaps output the XML that would have been generated as a result of the operation. Similar, goodness, I'm definitely getting tired. Similar to choco install fiddler no-op. Instead of choco install fiddler. Oh, I see. Yes, no, absolutely. Yes. In fact, let's just do it so it's on the video. And we have example. So let's just clear all that out. And if we were doing that, it would be choco install cake.portable no-op. Now, Cake, for those that don't know, Cake is a build automation system written in C# that I just happen to be a maintainer of as well. See, that's a bad example because there is no chocolatey install.ps1 file in the cake.portable because it is just a shim directly to the cake.exe. Go wild, change it in the code also. Okay, so I'm going to draw this to a close because I need to go in before I get divorce papers filed against me. But for now, we're at a point, I think, where we have a working export command that is certainly more functional than it was before. We've got a couple of to-do comments left to do. What I'll do is I'll commit all the code as is into my repository, and I will endeavor to finalize that with some unit tests and some integration tests and tidy it up a little bit. My intention then would be to obviously submit a pull request into Chocolatey Choco on GitHub so that it can start the process of getting merged into the OSS version of Chocolatey properly. When that will happen, I don't know, but I will definitely get that done. As I mentioned at the start of the stream, I'm not here next week. I don't have anything scheduled for next week because I'm already out, so I can't do the stream at all. But the following week, I will be here with potentially a co-streamer who's going to help with the migration of some code into a new command line parser. But the one thing I did want to say about this is, let me just bring this up actually, and then we'll close it out. So this is my fork of Chocolatey Choco, and the branch that I'm currently working in is issue 357. Right now, I have added information into the commit comment about the stream itself. So if you look here, then this commit references the YouTube recording of the stream, and then vice versa from the YouTube stream I've referenced this commit, so there's kind of a synergy between the two. Now, obviously, when this goes into Chocolatey code base, we're not going to care about any of these things because they're not important to the code base itself. So what I'll probably end up doing is creating a new branch and doing the exact same changes as a single commit into that branch and then submit that as a pull request. That way, this will exist forever, and there will be a reference to and from the YouTube videos to the commits. So it's not cheating in any way. I'm just going to replay those commits on another branch and then rebase them into a single commit with a suitable commit comment for going into Chocolatey itself. Okay, so at that point, with that PR, you guys can definitely comment to your heart's content, or you can make suggestions via a PR into my branch to correct things that you guys don't agree with. So definitely feel free to do that. I'll endeavour to get that done sooner rather than later, but my main focus for the next few days will be, when I'm not doing work, will be preparing for my talk that I have on Thursday and then for next week as well. So, I'm seeing a comment on Gitter from Manfred. You should also start doing Git sessions on Twitch. Is that like just using Git and what it is? And so again, I shall point everyone at my GitHub repository. So if we look at github.com/get13/livestreams, there is anything that you think would be useful to anyone. You can suggest here, just feel free to add an issue in here with suggestions as to how I use Git or how what Git is and what you can do with it. That's certainly something you could be up for a live stream in the future, absolutely. I'm not going to go that far. So there are people in the Chocolatey community whose Git foo, as I refer to it, is far better than mine. I know a little bit about Git, but I certainly wouldn't class myself as a Git expert by any stretch of the imagination. But I know enough to get by. But if that is something that is of interest to anyone, feel free to raise an issue, and we can certainly look at tackling that going forward. And as I mentioned, or as I think I mentioned, in my README now I have got a list of upcoming streams in terms of what the topics are. So if we wanted to add in another one on here on what is Git and how to use it, definitely suggest that, and I can look at getting that done. But for now, that's me. I'm going to push a button on my Stream Deck here, which should hopefully send or change my Twitter name back to what it was before, and it should send a message as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and say see everyone later. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's been useful.